Level 1. The Sureño. You are 13 years old and the neighborhood already has a name for you. Not the name your mother uses. The other one. The one that gets called across the street when you walk home from school. The one the older homies say with a nod that means something specific about what they think you are and what they think you'll become. You've been hearing that name for 2 years. You've been living up to it for 1. The distinction matters to you less with each passing month. Southern California. A city whose name you don't need to say because there are 20 cities that fit the description. Brown faces, brown houses, faded murals on the sides of liquor stores that sell to anyone old enough to reach the counter. Your neighborhood has a history that predates you by 40 years and will outlast you by 40 more, and you are the current chapter in a story that was already written before you were born. And you are only beginning to understand that you didn't choose this story so much as you were born into the gravity of it. You claim your neighborhood the way you'd claim a country of origin, with your hands, with your colors, with the specific architecture of how you stand on a corner. The rival gang 3 blocks north has their own corner and their own colors and their own history. And the distance between your corner and theirs is the geography of everything that matters to you right now. Drive-bys, retaliations, the particular arithmetic of disrespect and response that governs a universe 6 blocks wide. You think this is the game. You are wrong. The game is much larger than 6 blocks, and you are not even a player in it yet. You are a piece. There is a difference, and it will take you years to understand it, and by the time you understand it, it will be too late for the understanding to change anything meaningful about the direction your life is moving. The men who run the actual game are not on your corner. They are not in your city. They are behind walls. They have been behind walls for years, and some of them will be behind walls for the rest of their natural lives. And from behind those walls, they run everything you think you're doing voluntarily. Your neighborhood, your colors, your drive-bys, your drug corners, all of it exists inside a system of control that reaches from the security housing unit at Pelican Bay State Prison, down through the county jails, down through the streets to you, standing on your corner at 13, believing you're free. You are the bottom of a pyramid you cannot see the top of. You learn about the taxes before you learn about much else. Not from a formal explanation, from watching. From the way the older homies handle the money from the corner and the way some of that money disappears in a direction that doesn't track back to anyone visible. There are envelopes, there are drops, there are amounts that get sent up and never discussed in terms of where they go or who receives them, because the men who receive them are not men you're supposed to know about yet, and the fact that you're not supposed to know about them is itself a message about your position in the structure. You are the engine, you are not the driver. You hustle, because hustling is how you eat, and how you dress, and how you maintain the specific kind of respect that keeps you from being a target. You do the drive-bys because the drive-bys are the neighborhood's immune response, and you are a white blood cell, purpose-built for this function, replaceable as soon as you're used up. The older homies understand this more clearly than you do, and some of them try to tell you in the language available to them, which is usually a sideways comment about staying smart and not going away on anything serious. But the warning is never quite clear enough to override the gravity, and you are already in the pull of it. The night you catch your first case, you are 16. It is not a surprise. Not to you, not to anyone in the neighborhood. Not to the detective who writes up the report with the tired efficiency of a man filing paperwork he has filed hundreds of times. You spend the night in a holding cell with 2 men you don't know, and in the morning you are moved to county, and in county the world changes in a way that the neighborhood could not have prepared you for because the neighborhood was the game you thought you were playing. And county is the beginning of the actual game. And the actual game has rules you're about to learn whether you're ready for them or not. Level 2. The Camarada. The racial politics in here are not like the racial politics outside. Outside, the hostilities are neighborhood-specific, personal, historical. You beef with the gang 3 blocks north because of something that happened 7 years ago that neither of you were alive for, carried forward as obligation by the simple fact that you claimed the same colors as the men who were there. In here, the hostilities operate at a different level of abstraction. You are not an individual. You are your race. And your race has a side, and that side has a history, and that history has a structure, and at the top of that structure is an organization that you have been circling your entire life without ever quite looking at directly. La MA, the Mexican Mafia. Founded inside Duel Vocational Institution in 1957 by a group of Southern California Chicanos who were tired of being victimized and decided that the solution was to become the thing everyone feared rather than the thing everyone hurt. 60-some years later, they are one of the most powerful prison gangs in the United States, and they run everything in the California system that isn't run by the Aryan Brotherhood. And those two organizations have an understanding that goes back decades and that functions with the reliability of a business partnership between people who have correctly identified their mutual interests. You know the name. You've known the name since you were old enough to understand the neighborhood. But knowing the name and being in the proximity of the actual thing are different experiences entirely, and you're about to have the second experience. In county, you find your people quickly. Sureños, Southern California gang members who follow the same rules you follow and who pay taxes to the same invisible bosses. There is an orientation that nobody formally delivers, but that you absorb in the first 72 hours through observation and conversation and the quiet authority of men who have been here before and who know how this works. Where to stand, where not to stand, who to speak to and how. Who to avoid and why. The unwritten constitution of this space, enforced not by any guard, but by the men in here who answer to men further up the chain. They put you to work almost immediately. The kites come first. A kite is a communication, a message so compressed and miniaturized that it can be concealed inside a human body and transported from one unit to another without any metal detector catching it, and without any guard knowing it exists. You have seen them up close now. They are extraordinary objects in their own obscure way. Messages written in handwriting so small it requires effort to read, on paper so thin it barely exists, wrapped in multiple layers of plastic torn from bags, sealed tight, and swallowed or placed somewhere else entirely. The men who write them are some of the most dangerous people in the California prison system, and the messages they contain are directives, intelligence, and occasionally, sentences. You carry them because you are told to carry them. You do not read them because you are not supposed to read them, and because you have enough operational awareness to understand that reading a message you were given to carry and not to read would be a specific type of mistake, with specific consequences you do not want to experience. You carry them from one place to the designated recipient, and you do not ask about the contents, and you do not mention it to anyone. And when it is done, you go back to your bunk, and you act as though nothing occurred. You also hold the steel. The shanks that the maid members cannot afford to be caught with are yours to hold, which means if there is a sweep and they find it, it belongs to you. You understand this. You accept it. The logic of your acceptance is not coerced in any direct way. It is the logic of someone who understands which direction the power flows and who wants to be moving in the direction of power rather than against it. You hold the steel because holding the steel is what a camarada does, and being a camarada is the position available to you, and having a position is infinitely better than having none. The moment of truth comes 3 months in. It comes as a name. Somebody gives you a name and a location, which in the context of this yard means a person and a time. And the instruction attached to the name and the location is understood without being spoken directly, because the language for this instruction exists, and everyone in this space knows it fluently. You are being told to put in work. You are being told to earn your place in the structure by demonstrating that the structure can rely on you to do what the structure requires when the structure requires it. You don't ask why. You already understood, somewhere in the architecture of all the things you've been learning since county, that asking why is not a thing that happens in this context. Asking why implies that you might decide differently depending on the answer. And a man who might decide differently depending on the answer is not a man this organization wants in the position it's offering you. The absence of the question is itself the answer they need from you. In the yard, in the specific window of time that the information gave you, with the specific piece of steel that you've been holding for 3 months, you do what you were told to do. What happens next takes less than 10 seconds. You walk away. You don't run. Running is information. Walking is nothing. You are a man crossing a yard, which is a thing that dozens of men are doing at any given moment, and you are simply one of them, and the steel is somewhere it won't be found, and what just occurred in the far corner of the yard is something the guards will manage with their reports and their language and their formal procedures that exist in a parallel reality to the one you just acted in. That night, from a direction that doesn't announce itself, word reaches you. You've been seen. Not by the guards, by the people who matter. Level 3. The Carnal. There is no ceremony the way civilians imagine ceremony. No formal room with lit candles and a spoken oath over a Bible. What there is instead is a conversation that has a specific quality, a specific weight, that you recognize immediately as different from every conversation you have had since you came inside. It happens in a corner of the yard on a Tuesday afternoon between you and a man who has been in the system for 19 years and whose authority in this space is so absolute and so long established that it operates below the threshold of needing demonstration. He speaks for a few minutes. You listen. When it is over, you are different from what you were when it started. Not in any way visible to any camera or any guard, but in every way that will govern the rest of your life. You are carnal now. You are a made brother of La M. The black hand tattoo comes later, placed by a man who does this work with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done it many times, using materials assembled from what is available inside these walls. The tattoo is not the membership. It is the announcement of the membership. The membership happened in the conversation in the yard on a Tuesday afternoon, in the specific weight of a few spoken words between a 19-year veteran and a young man who had just demonstrated that he could be relied upon. The paranoia starts here, not immediately, not as a dramatic transformation, as a gradual recalibration of how you process information about the men around you, the men you are now a part of. The men whose decisions made you and who can unmake you with equal efficiency. You understand now with the clarity that comes from being inside the thing rather than approaching it, that membership in this organization is not a relationship with an exit clause. There is a phrase that gets said sometimes, not often, not loudly, but with a precision that ensures it's heard. The only way out is in a box. You've heard this before. You heard it on the street, in the neighborhood, in the general mythology of La M that circulated through the culture you grew up in. Hearing it as mythology is different from hearing it as operational fact from inside the organization, from the perspective of a man who has just signed the document that makes it applicable to him. You sit in the circles on the yard now. That is how votes happen. Not in any space that cameras can fully cover, not in any configuration that announces itself as a meeting. In the specific geometry of men standing or sitting in ways that look incidental from a distance, but that have a structure to them, a direction of information flow, a decision architecture. You are present in these circles not yet as the man with the most authority in the room, but as a man whose presence is recognized and whose input is solicited on certain matters, and whose vote carries weight in the calculation. Somebody brings a name to the circle. The name carries context. A violation, a debt, a betrayal, a threat. The nature of the transgression is explained with an economy of language that contains all necessary information and no unnecessary sentiment. Discussion occurs. It is not long. The decision is made in the manner that decisions are made here, through a process that has no formal rulebook, but that operates with the consistency of an institution that has been making these decisions for 60 years. You vote. The vote is not a dramatic moment. That is one of the things about this life that surprises civilians when they encounter it. The most consequential decisions look nothing like the movies. No raised voices, no visible emotion. A word, sometimes a gesture, sometimes just a sustained eye contact that communicates a position. The decision gets made, and the decision becomes a directive, and the directive travels down the chain through the kites and the whispered words and the held messages, and somewhere downstream a man who doesn't know your name carries out what your circle decided in a corner of a yard on an unremarkable afternoon. You manage the drug trade inside, and you tax the gangs outside. The taxation of the street gangs is the mechanism by which the organization extends its authority beyond the walls. Every Sureño gang in Southern California pays taxes to La M. The amount varies. The collection method varies. The enforcement mechanism when collection fails does not vary. The money comes in through channels you've come to understand as intricate and as resilient as anything in the formal economy. Moving through family members and lawyers and coded communications and deposits that travel through multiple hands before they reach a place where they're useful. You are organized crime now, not in the sense of the neighborhood, in the sense of an institution. The difference is structural. The neighborhood was reactive, territorial, emotional, a product of the specific history of a specific 6-block area. What you are now is deliberate, systematic, removed from the emotional content of the street by layers of organizational logic that make the decisions feel less like violence and more like policy. That removal is useful. It is also the most dangerous thing that has happened to you, more dangerous than the steel and the kites and the yard, because it means you have crossed a threshold in how you understand what you're doing, and that threshold has no door going back. Level 4. The Mesa, Pelican Bay, the security housing unit. You have heard about this place your entire incarcerated life, the way people who live near a particular mountain hear about its summit. It exists at the outer edge of the known territory, the furthest point of a geography that already has no good points. Men go to the SHU, and their experience becomes something that can't be fully communicated, because the words available to describe it were built for a different scale of human experience. 23 hours a day in a concrete box that measures roughly 8 by 10 feet. No windows in any sense that the word carries meaning for a person who has lived with weather. A slot in the door for the tray. 1 hour in a slightly larger concrete box they call the exercise pen, which is open to the sky at the top, so you can sometimes see a rectangle of light that changes color with the time of day. No congregate activities, no yard in the conventional sense, no interaction with general population. You exist in a space designed specifically to prevent the kind of human contact that makes social organization possible. And from this box, you run a territory that extends across hundreds of miles. That is the specific, operational irony of the SHU. The California Department of Corrections placed the most dangerous and most organizationally connected members of La M in the most isolated unit in the system on the theory that isolation would interrupt their ability to direct the organization. What isolation actually did was concentrate the organization's most experienced leadership in a single facility and give them nothing but time and motivation to refine their methods of communication until those methods became essentially impervious to the physical constraints of the isolation. The kites travel in, and they travel out. Your circle here is made of concrete walls, but the reach of what gets decided in your concrete box extends to the street gangs of Los Angeles and San Diego and the Central Valley, to the county jails where the next generation is being evaluated and sorted and put to work, to the independent drug distribution networks that owe their operating licenses to the organization's tolerance, which is itself conditional and renewable, on terms set by men in boxes who the people on the street will never see. You issue green lights. A green light is a sanctioned kill order, not on an individual always, though sometimes on an individual. Also on entire street gangs. An entire gang can receive a green light from the SHU, which means that any Sureño anywhere in the state who encounters a member of that gang has standing permission, and in some cases, an obligation, to act against them. The green light functions as a declaration that a particular group has been determined by the Mesa to be outside the protection of the organizational structure. What follows from that determination follows from it without needing to be further specified. You issue them by kite. By whispered message passed through the labyrinthine communication infrastructure of a prison system that is, despite the best efforts of the CDCR and the FBI and every law enforcement body that has studied it, fundamentally unable to stop the flow of information between its most isolated prisoners and the world outside. You negotiate with the Aryan Brotherhood. The AB controls white inmates in the California system the way La MA controls Southern Hispanics. The relationship between the two organizations has been functional for decades and is one of the more coldly rational partnerships in the history of organized crime. Two groups whose membership would kill each other on sight in almost any other context have determined that their mutual interests in controlling the prison economy and the drug trade are better served by a working alliance than by the alternative. These negotiations happen through intermediaries, through the same channels the kites travel, with a formality and a precision that would be recognizable to any diplomat. The psychological toll of the SHU is a documented phenomenon. Researchers have studied it. Courts have litigated it. The specific effects of years of extreme isolation on the human nervous system have been catalogued with clinical precision. Hypervigilance, hypersensitivity to stimuli, perceptual distortions, difficulty tolerating ambiguity, cognitive constriction. The emergence of a mental environment shaped entirely by the interior, because there is nothing exterior to shape it. The research is accurate. You know it is accurate because you are living the described symptoms while simultaneously using the mental architecture that produced them to make decisions that affect thousands of lives. That is the most disorienting part, not the isolation itself. Though the isolation is real and its weight is real, and there are hours in the dark when it presses on you with a physical quality that has no name in any language you have. The most disorienting part is the coexistence of the profound smallness of your physical world and the enormous scope of your operational reach. You exist in 8 by 10 feet of concrete, and you determine who lives and who dies in housing projects 300 miles away. Those two realities occupy the same body at the same time, and the human nervous system was not built to house them simultaneously without cost. You pay the cost daily. The years pass in units that stop corresponding to any natural rhythm. The slot opens. The tray arrives. The slot closes. 1 hour in the pen. The rectangle of sky lightens and darkens. The messages come in. The messages go out. The circle of men in their own boxes, connected through channels the administration cannot fully eliminate, continues to deliberate and decide and direct. The organization continues. You continue. Whether what continues is still fully the person who arrived here is a question you have learned not to ask, because the asking of it serves no operational purpose and produces answers that are not useful. Level 5. The Padrino. Decades. That is the unit that matters now. Not days. Not years as individual, discrete things with beginnings and endings you can distinguish. Decades. The way geologists measure the age of stone. The way climatologists measure the drift of a continent. You are the Padrino. That word carries weight in the language of your organization that it carries in no English equivalent. It is not simply boss. It is godfather in the original sense, The man at the center of a network of obligation and loyalty and fear that extends so far in every direction that even you cannot fully see its edges. You have been in the system long enough that men who run things on the street were born after you came inside. The organization you now sit at the top of has been shaped by your decisions over 2 decades in ways that you can trace and ways that you cannot, because power at this scale produces consequences that propagate further than intention. You are a ghost in the operational sense. Your name circulates in briefings at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, and the CDCR's Intelligence Unit, and the United States Attorney's Office for the Central District of California. Your name is in files that have your prison identification number on them and decades of documented communications and a network map that law enforcement has been trying to complete for years. They know the name. They cannot touch what the name represents because what the name represents is a system, and a system is harder to prosecute than a person, even when you can prove the person runs the system. The cell phone is how you maintain it, smuggled in through channels that change because they have to change, powered by chargers assembled from components that arrive through different channels at different times. Used in windows of time carefully timed around the schedules of the monitoring systems, encrypted in the organizational language that has been refined over decades into a shorthand that says everything necessary in the fewest possible characters. With this phone, you issue instructions that travel from your box to a free person's ear, to a street in a city you haven't visited since you were a young man with a neighborhood name and a corner to stand on. The power is absolute. You know it is absolute because you have tested it. Not deliberately, not as an experiment. You have tested it by issuing directives that required significant effort and significant risk from the people who carried them out, and those directives were carried out. The organization's compliance with your authority is not theoretical. It is demonstrated repeatedly and consistently across years and across circumstances that would provide abundant opportunity for that compliance to fail if the underlying structure were not genuinely solid. But you sit in a box. That is the sentence that follows the sentence about absolute power and cannot be detached from it. You sit in a box and your power is absolute. And those two facts coexist in your daily experience with a tension that does not resolve, cannot resolve, because the resolution would require one of them to be false, and neither is false. You think about the sun sometimes. Not nostalgically, exactly, with the specific quality of attention that comes from having been denied something for so long that it has receded from the category of thing you actually want into the category of concept you study. You know what the sun feels like on skin. You know it abstractly in the way you know things from your life before inside, which is a form of knowing that is increasingly difficult to distinguish from imagination. The rectangle of sky in the exercise pen is not the sun. It is the sky, which is a different relationship. You have become an expert in subtle distinctions. The paranoia about your own organization is its own specific weight. You know how the Mesa works because you have been in the Mesa for years, and you have voted on decisions that included decisions about men who were once in your position. You know that the same process that elevated you can reverse its judgment. You know that weakness perceived becomes weakness actual in the logic of the organization, and that the management of perceived strength from inside a solitary confinement cell is perhaps the most technically demanding thing you have ever done. Every communication you send is calibrated for both its informational content and its signal about your continued command. Every decision you make about when to act and when to wait is assessed partly for its operational wisdom and partly for what it communicates about your state of mind and your state of power. You are your own performance, constantly, without an audience that doesn't count. The FBI watches. You know they watch because the evidence of their watching is visible in the way certain communications get intercepted, in the timing of certain searches and transfers, in the pattern of information that suggests someone in or near your network is talking to people they shouldn't be talking to. You have been managing this surveillance for so long that it has become part of the operational environment, the same way weather is part of the operational environment for a farmer, a condition you plan around rather than a problem you solve. You will never see the sun as a free man again. You know this. You have known it for a long time, and you have processed it in the way you process everything else that is true and immovable, by reaching an accommodation with it that allows continued function. The grief about this fact is not absent. It is present in the moments when the rectangle of sky changes color in the late afternoon in a way that suggests a particular quality of light that used to mean something in your life before, a light that meant the day was ending and the evening was starting, and the evening had a texture that you have not experienced in decades. In those moments, the grief is present, and then the slot opens, and the tray arrives, and the slot closes, and you pick up the phone, and the organization continues. Somewhere in Southern California, a 13-year-old is standing on a corner. He claims his neighborhood. He knows the older homies. He is beginning to hear a name, said with a certain quality of voice that communicates something about what the name means and what it expects of him. He doesn't understand yet that the corner he's standing on is a point at the very bottom of a structure that reaches, at its highest point, to a concrete box where a ghost sits in the dark and determines the arithmetic of his future. He will understand. They always understand. By the time they understand, they are already here. And here, as you have known for a very long time, is the only place this story goes.